Once upon a time, in a peaceful village nestled beside a wide river, there was a woman named Adama, though everyone called her Mama Jovia. She carried her baby within her for longer than anyone could recall, an entire cycle of moons, 12 in total. Yet still the cries of a child never came. The villagers whispered among themselves, their voices heavy with concern. "This is not right," they said, their gazes full of wonder. "Not even the great elephants wait this long," one of them remarked, shaking their head in disbelief. One morning, as the sun rose with a golden dance across the roofs, Mama Jovia cried out in pain. Her time had come. People dropped what they were doing, rushing to her humble hut with hearts full of excitement and anxiety. The air hummed with the sound of eager feet and fluttering hearts. Inside the hut, the midwife worked swiftly, her hands trembling with each passing moment as the labor progressed. It was clear that something was different, something strange was unfolding. Outside, the villagers waited anxiously, their hearts pounding like the deep drumbeats of a festival. Finally, the door creaked open, and the midwife stepped out. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, as if she'd seen a spirit. With a voice that barely rose above a whisper, she said, "It's a girl. But she has 2 heads." A stunned silence fell over the crowd, followed by gasps. Some covered their mouths, others closed their eyes in disbelief. 2 heads, they murmured. What kind of child is this? They inched closer to the hut, their curiosity piqued. When the baby was finally brought outside, the crowd froze. One head was as light as the golden sands along the river, while the other was as dark as the shadows beneath the ancient fig trees. The people stared, wide-eyed, some shaking their heads and muttering, "This is no child. This must be a curse." Others, however, saw things differently. "No, this is a blessing," they said with wide smiles. 2 heads mean double the wisdom. Mama Jovia looked at her child, her eyes soft with love. She didn't care about curses or blessings. "My child is special," she said, holding the baby close to her heart. The villagers argued outside her hut, unsure of what to make of this unique child. "What do we call her?" someone asked. "Twins or one child?" Before anyone could answer, an elder with a long white beard raised his hand. "Let the heads have names," he said, his voice wise and calm. "The fair one shall be called Zuri for beauty. The dark one shall be called Kazi for strength." And so the child with 2 heads was named Zuri and Kazi. The villagers returned to their homes, still whispering about what they had seen. Some believed the child was a gift from the gods, while others thought Mama Jovia must have done something wrong to bring such a strange child into the world. Zuri and Kazi grew quickly, like vines after the first rains. Mama Jovia would laugh and shake her head as she watched them. "These 2 heads share one stomach," she would say. "They cry together, eat together, and sleep at the same time." As they grew, Zuri and Kazi amazed everyone in the village. They didn't just walk. Early they ran. They didn't just speak. They spoke in ways that made people stop and listen. By the time they started school, it was clear they were different in many ways. In the classroom, they always knew the answers. Their minds worked together, the teacher would say proudly. "No wonder they're the best in class, they have 2 heads. The other children would laugh. "Hey, of course they do, they have 2 heads. But Zuri and Kazi were not just gifted in their minds. They were a blessing to the village. They were strong and they learned quickly, but even with 2 heads, they sometimes did not agree. Zuri loved rice, especially when it smelled of fresh herbs, while Kazi could never get enough of beans, especially when topped with spicy stew. At the dining table, they would argue. "Rice is better," Zuri would insist, her light head shaking as she spoke. "No, beans are better," Kazi would argue back, her darker head firm in its conviction. Mama Jovia would chuckle and say, "You two settle down. Rice today, beans tomorrow." It wasn't just food they disagreed on. Zuri's eyes sparkled whenever she saw bright yellow, especially in a dress. "This one is perfect," she would exclaim, but Kazi would wrinkle her nose. "No, the red one is better," she'd insist. Despite their differences, Zuri and Kazi always found a way to compromise. "Fine," Zuri would agree. "Let's take the yellow one today and the red one next time." The villagers adored them, watching with wonder as they played, studied, and lived together. "2 heads, 1 body," they would say. Even when they fight, they have no choice but to get along. As the years passed, Zuri and Kazi grew into beautiful young women. Their laughter softened the hearts of all who heard it, and their steps became graceful. Their eyes sparkled with wisdom, and the villagers marveled at how much they had blossomed. However, when it came to marriage, the men in the village hesitated. "How can we marry two heads?" they whispered to each other. "It's like having two wives in one body." Zuri and Kazi overheard the whispers, but held their heads high. Mama Jovia consoled them. "The right one will come." "Do not worry," she said. After Kai's departure, Mama Jovia gently spoke to her daughters. "My dear ones, patience is key. A good man will come. Be patient." At last, 3 men came forward, hoping to marry Zuri and Kazi, one after the other. But with each new suitor, the trouble deepened. None of the men could win their hearts. The first was Cheki. Tall, bold, and confident as the river after a thunderstorm, his voice boomed and his laughter shook the air. He entered a room like a king, and the villagers admired his strength. Kazi's dark eyes sparkled when she saw him. "He is the one," Kazi whispered. "He's strong, handsome, and fearless." But Zuri wasn't convinced. "He's too loud," she frowned. "I don't think I like him." Kazi wasn't deterred. "Give him a chance, he's perfect for us," she insisted, her excitement like the midday sun. Reluctantly, Zuri agreed. Cheki brought them sweet palm wine and told stories of his bravery, and Kazi's heart warmed with every visit, while Zuri watched with suspicion. The wedding was grand. Drums played, dancers moved with grace, and the air was filled with music and cheer. The elders blessed their union, and the villagers cheered. Mama Jovia smiled through her tears. "May this marriage bring joy to my daughters." At first, all seemed well. Kazi found joy in Cheki's boldness and felt safe in his strength, but Zuri couldn't bear it. His laughter was too loud, his voice too sharp. "He doesn't care about what I want," Zuri complained. "He listens to Kazi too, much." Cheki tried his best to please both sisters, but no matter what he did, Zuri wasn't happy. They fought, their voices rising like a storm. "I can't live like this," Zuri cried one night. "Why should I be stuck with someone I don't want?" The arguments grew louder. Cheki, exhausted, cried out, "How can I please both of you at the same time?" And after just 1 year, the marriage shattered like a clay pot dropped from a high place. Cheki left, his head bowed in defeat. The villagers whispered, "We knew this would happen. 2 heads, 1 body, it's a curse." But Zuri and Kazi didn't listen. They returned to Mama Jovia's hut, their hearts heavy yet hopeful. Kazi whispered to Zuri, "Maybe the next man will be better." And with that, they waited, their hearts holding on to the flickering flame of hope. Soon after Cheki's departure, another suitor appeared. His name was Kai. Unlike Cheki, Ki was calm, with a voice as soft as the morning breeze and a heart as kind as gentle rain. Zuri's fair face lit up when she saw him. "He's perfect," she exclaimed. "He listens. He understands. He's nothing like Cheki." But Kazi wasn't convinced. "He's too quiet," Kazi frowned. "How can a man so silent protect us? He's boring." Zuri wouldn't hear it. "We need peace, Kazi," she insisted. "Kai will bring us that." Together, they agreed to marry Ki. The wedding was smaller, this time quieter, just like Kai himself. Mama Jovia blessed them with a cautious smile, hoping this union would last. At first, all seemed perfect. Kai brought calmness to their lives. He spoke softly, cooked meals with them, and even helped with chores around the house. Zuri blossomed in his care. "Ki makes me feel whole," she would laugh softly. But Kazi didn't feel the same way. Ki's gentleness didn't touch her. "He doesn't even talk to me," she complained to Zuri. "He only cares about you." Zuri brushed her off. "You're imagining things, Kazi. Ki is kind to both of us." But Kazi's unhappiness grew. She started sulking during meals and snapping at Zuri over small things. The sisters began to argue more and more, their voices rising like clashing cymbals. Kai, exhausted, tried his best to mediate. "Please, can we not fight?" he would plead, his voice full of sadness. But no matter how hard he tried, The peace he brought cracked under the weight of their quarrels. "I can't take this anymore," Kai finally said one evening, his voice heavy. "I wanted to make you happy, but I can't. This marriage isn't working." After 2 years, Kai left, leaving Zuri and Kazi behind. The villagers shook their heads, their whispers growing louder. "They're cursed," they said. "No man can handle them." Mama Jovia comforted her daughters, her hands gentle on their backs. "Sometimes love takes time," she said softly. But even she began to wonder if her daughters would ever find happiness. That night, as Zuri and Kazi sat, together, their hearts heavy with sorrow, Kazi sighed. "Maybe love isn't meant for us," she said quietly. But Zuri shook her head. "No, we will find someone. I know it," she said firmly. And so they waited again, holding on to hope like a flickering flame in the wind, waiting for the right one to come. Zuri and Kazi tried to stay busy, but their hearts longed for love. Then one day a merchant named Obina arrived in the village, his bags filled with goods and his mouth full of captivating stories. Obina was lively, his eyes sparkling like morning dew, and his voice was so warm it could make even the saddest heart smile. He spoke of faraway lands, golden sunsets, and markets filled with treasures. The villagers gathered around him, eager to hear his tales. When Obina met Zuri and Kazi, his smile widened. "2 heads, twice the beauty," he laughed. Zuri and Kazi couldn't help but smile back at him. His charm was like honey, drawing everyone in. "He's wonderful," Zuri said, her fair head tilting slightly. "I like him too," Kazi agreed, her dark eyes shining. For the first time, both sisters liked the same man. Mama Jovia saw the excitement in her daughter's eyes and prayed silently, "May this one bring them peace." The wedding was a joyful occasion filled with music and laughter. The villagers whispered, "Maybe this time it will work." At first it seemed as if their prayers were answered. Obina showered Zuri and Kazi with gifts from his travels, beautiful fabrics, sparkling beads, and delicious spices. His stories brought joy to their evenings, and his love seemed to light up their lives. But soon, troubles began to brew. Zuri felt Obina spent too much time with Kazi. "He only loves you," Zuri complained one night. "He hardly looks at me." "That's not true," Kazi snapped back. "You're just jealous because he likes my laughter." The arguments grew, louder, like thunder rumbling before a storm. At first, Obina tried to calm things down. "My beautiful wives," he said, "why do you fight? You are both precious to me." But his words couldn't stop the storm from raging. The fights only became worse, with Zuri and Kazi blaming each other for every little thing. One evening, their anger boiled over, and they began hitting each other, their voices sharp like broken glass. Obina stood in the corner, his hands on his head. "Enough!" he shouted. "I can't live like this. I love you both, but I cannot take this madness." After a year, Obina packed his bags and left. His once bright smile was replaced by a heavy frown. The villagers shook their heads. "It's clear now," they murmured. "They are cursed. No man can make them happy." Zuri and Kazi stayed in their mother's hut, their hearts heavy with guilt and sorrow. Mama Jovia tried to comfort them, but even her gentle words couldn't heal their pain. One fateful day, Zuri and Kazi walked slowly along the dusty path, a water pot balanced on their shared head as they made their way to the river. Their hearts felt heavier than the pot they carried. When they reached the river, the sight of the calm water only deepened their sadness. They sat down the pot and rested on the grassy bank, their heads bowed low. Tears rolled down Zuri's fair cheek and dripped onto Kazi's darker one. As they sat there, they noticed an old woman sitting on a smooth rock by the river. Her back was bent like an ancient tree, and her face was covered with wrinkles that seemed to tell 1,000 stories. But her eyes, they sparkled like stars. "Why are you crying, my children?" the old woman asked, her voice soft but strong. Zuri and Kazi looked up in surprise. "Who is she?" Zuri whispered. "I don't know," Kazi replied, wiping her tears. The old woman smiled gently. "Come closer," she beckoned. "Sit with me." Something about her felt safe, like the warmth of a mother's embrace. The sisters stood and sat beside her. "Tell me, why are you crying?" the old woman asked again. The words spilled out of Zuri and Kazi like water from a broken pot. They told her everything, the failed marriages, the villagers' harsh whispers, and the deep sadness they carried in their hearts. The old woman listened quietly, nodding now and then. When they finished, she looked at them with eyes full of understanding. "Your pain is heavy," she said, her voice like a soothing breeze. "But it is not without cause." "What do you mean?" Zuri asked, her voice trembling. The old woman leaned closer. "Ask your mother what happened when she was pregnant with you," she said. "She has a secret." "A secret?" Kazi echoed, her eyes wide. The old woman nodded. "A truth that has been buried for too long. Go, my children, speak to her." Before they could ask more, the old woman stood up, walked to the river's edge, and disappeared into the twilight, leaving only ripples on the water. Zuri and Kazi sat in silence, the old woman's words echoing in their minds. A secret. What could Mama Jovia be hiding? They picked up their pot, filled it with water and hurried home, determined to uncover the truth. When they reached home, their faces wet with tears, they sat at Mama Jovia's feet. Their voices trembled. "Mama, we need to talk," Zuri said, her voice shaking. "What is it, my children?" Mama Jovia asked, setting down her wooden spoon. Kazi spoke quickly, her words rushing like the river. "So I met an old woman by the river. She said you have a secret, something about when you were pregnant with us." Mama Jovia froze. Mama Jovia's hands, wrinkled and strong, gripped the edge of her wrapper as she listened. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, Mama," Zuri begged, her eyes filled with pleading. "Tell us the truth. What happened when you were pregnant with us?" Mama Jovia's eyes filled with tears, and she turned, away staring into the flames of the fire as if searching for the courage to speak. "It's not something I ever wanted to talk about," she began, her voice heavy with sorrow. "But maybe it's time you knew." She took a deep breath, gathering strength from within. "When I was pregnant with you, there was a day when the sun burned so hot it felt like the earth itself was on fire. I was walking home from the market, my throat dry as a desert." She paused, her voice breaking as she wiped her tears with the edge of her wrapper. "When I passed the river, I couldn't resist. I knew the tradition. Pregnant women are forbidden to go near the river during the hot afternoon. But I was so thirsty." Her voice broke again and she wiped her eyes. "I bent down to drink, and that's when I felt it, a cold hand on my shoulder. I looked up and there she was, the river spirit. Her eyes were like deep pools, and her voice was as loud as thunder. 'You have broken the law,' the river spirit said. 'For this you will pay.' Mama Jovia's tears flowed freely now. 'She cursed me,' she whispered. 'You were supposed to be twins, but her curse made you one, 2 heads, 1 body.' The room fell silent. Zuri and Kazi stared at their mother, their faces pale with shock. "Mama," Zuri whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I was ashamed," Mama Jovia said, tears streaming down her face. "I hoped the curse wouldn't define your lives, but now I see that it has." Zuri and Kazi sat in silence, their hearts heavy with this new knowledge. Finally Kazi spoke, her voice determined. "We must go to the river. We must speak to the spirit." Without another word, Zuri and Kazi exchanged a glance, their resolve firm. They stood up and left the house, heading back to the river to find the old woman. When they reached the riverbank, the old woman was waiting, her figure outlined by the moonlight. "You know the truth now," she said. "Yes," Zuri replied. "Mama told us everything. Can the curse be broken?" The old woman nodded. "It can," she said, "but it will require a great sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Kazi asked, her voice trembling. "You will know when the time comes," the woman replied. "Go back to your village. Tell them what must be done. If they agree, the curse can be lifted. If not, you will remain as you are." Zuri and Kazi exchanged a glance, fear and hope swirling in their eyes. They nodded, thanked the old woman, and turned back toward the village, the weight of her words heavy in their hearts. The path ahead was uncertain, but they were determined to face it together. When they returned to the villagers gathered in the square to hear Zuri and Kazi's story. The villagers looked at each other, unsure of what to do. The curse wasn't just the sisters' burden anymore. It was now the whole village's responsibility. The old woman from the river appeared, her presence commanding like the rising sun. Her voice seemed to come from the very earth itself. To break the curse, she said, the entire village must come together for 7 days. Offerings must be made to the river spirit, food, oil, and animals. Zuri and Kazi must stay in the shrine by the river, fasting and praying. Only then will the curse be lifted. Though some grumbled about the cost, the villagers agreed. On the first day they brought yams and palm oil. On the second day, chickens were offered to the river. By the third day, goats bleated, and the air was filled with the aroma of incense. Meanwhile, Zuri and Kazi stayed in the shrine, weak from hunger but strong in spirit. They knelt side by side, their prayers rising like smoke from a fire. "Please, let this work," Zuri whispered, her voice faint. "We'll endure anything," Kazi added, her head bowed low. Each day the villagers returned with more offerings, their faces filled with hope. The air grew heavier as the days passed, and even the children, who didn't fully understand, prayed with small hands clasped tightly. On the 7th day, the sky darkened. Thunder roared and the river rose high, its waves crashing like an angry beast. The villagers watched in fear, their offerings trembling in their hands. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm stopped. The river became calm, its surface smooth like glass. The old woman stepped forward. "Come out, my children," she called. The villagers held their breath as Zuri and Kazi stepped out of the shrine. Gasps filled the air. They were no longer conjoined. Each had her own body. Zuri stood on the left, fair and glowing, while Kazi stood on the right, her dark skin radiant. The villagers erupted in cheers. "The curse is broken," they cried. "The river spirit has forgiven them." Zuri and Kazi smiled, tears streaming down their faces. For the first time they felt whole, free to live their lives as individuals. In the months that followed, Zuri married a kind blacksmith, and Kazi found love with a gentle farmer. They both had children and lived happily. The villagers had learned their lesson. From that day on, no pregnant woman dared to go near the river during the hot afternoon. The tale of Zuri and Kazi became a story of hope, love, and the power of sacrifice.